Hey team, and welcome to another astrological magical elections video. In this video, we're going to cover magical election opportunities from the Aries Full Moon on October 13th until the Scorpio New Moon on October 27th. In this time period, we've only got two magical electional opportunities to look at. One, a Lunar Mansion Talisman, a Lunar Mansion that we've seen a few times before, and a fixed star Talisman, one that I don't think we've talked about before, actually. Before we move into talking about those elections themselves, I want to take a quick second and talk about the moon. Now, the moon is a planet that I talk about a lot, really, in these videos because the moon's position, because the moon's function is so important, is so pivotal, really, in astrology generally, but even more specifically in astrological magic. We're constantly concerned with what the moon's doing, who she's applying to, what house she's in, things like that. We're constantly focused on the state of the moon. One question that I get kind of often is why I don't focus more on the charts of or magic that can be utilized during full and new moon. You know, I structured the videos to come out around the full and the new moons, but I don't really talk about those charts or those opportunities themselves for magical purposes. And really the main reason is because in the astrological tradition, in the magical astrological tradition that is, the new and full moons are kind of difficult times. Really, any kind of time where the moon and the sun have a difficult aspectual relationship with one another is generally a bad time for astrological magic and talisman making. And so we see this when the moon is new, where she's conjoined the sun, and where she's full, when she's opposed the sun. We also see it when the moon is at half moon, where she's square the sun on either side. But we don't really talk about this one as much or hear as much about this just because of the popularity of, or however you want to phrase it, of the new moon and the full moon in, popular consciousness and those kinds of things. You just don't really, like, nobody throws like half moon parties, but like full and new moons are big events. So when we're having a new moon, by definition, the moon is conjoined the sun. And when the moon is conjoined the sun, we can't see the moon. We can't see any planet when they're conjoined the sun. And so we don't want that, basically, with the moon. We want to be able to see the moon. We want the moon to be growing in light or waning in light, if that's what our magical purpose is more aligned to. But we want to be able to see the moon. We want the moon to have light, because that lunar light is itself symbolic of the work that we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to manifest, or however you want to phrase that. So there are certain magical goals that a new moon is more appropriate for, like invisibility, things that just kind of using that inability to see something to your own advantage. If you want to keep something hidden, kind of keep something to yourself, that can be something that new moon magic in specific contexts or with specific charts can be used for very positively. Knock yourself out. But you don't generally want a new moon if you're trying to get a new job or something like that. Like you don't want that emptiness that the new moon symbolizes to be woven into whatever ritual purpose you're trying to get, because you want to fill something up, not have something be symbolically empty. So that's why the waxing moon phase is something that would be generally better for that kind of working, where the moon has light but is looking to grow that light. Just as one who has money would maybe look to grow that money through investment, or who is looking for a better position. We're focused on that growth orientation. Now with the full moon, here we have the moon, kind of the opposite problem, where the moon is opposed to the sun. So oppositions in astrology are generally very confrontational, very adversarial, and very damaging. In this case, it's the moon who comes out on the damaged end in relation to the sun. Now the characteristic with full moon magic is that the events or the working or whatever kind of peaks quickly. And this can be another thing that's used to one's own advantage. If there's something that you want to happen immediately, like right now, then a full moon kind of ritual or magic might be more appropriate to that. But the catch is it matures quickly, and so it kind of runs out of steam really quickly because it's reached its endpoint too soon. So if you have something that you're trying to acquire or to grow or cultivate, you want to focus more on the waxing moon phase because it's a moon that has room to grow or room to mature in some way. Whereas a full moon is just yep, we're here now. And it's just kind of like stepping out your door and being at your destination, if your destination was to be right outside your door. With the moon, we're really more focused on the journey of the moon, and we see that characterized more typically in the tradition of astrology as the moon's next aspect, what planet she's going to aspect next characterizes her journey, and her phase. Is she waxing or waning? Is her journey one where she ventures out and gains something, whether knowledge, information, or experience, as in the waxing phase, or is her journey something more of a return home journey, as in the waning phase? That's really more what we're focused on. So, with that all being said, that's why typically the new and full moons are times that I avoid. Usually I try to give space between the moon and the sun of about one sign. I don't want them to be either in the same sign or in opposing signs. So you'll usually never see that configuration happening in any of the electional charts that I share, unless it's somehow a feature of the chart, in which case it'll be something that's talked about. But typically I want them to be a sign removed from each other, to where they're not directly influencing each other in those kinds of negative ways. Trines and sextiles between the moon and sun are grade A+, but squares, even squares sometimes, but oppositions and conjunctions generally are not. So let's go ahead and jump right into our electional charts for this 2-week period. Our first electional opportunity is actually for a Pleiades fixed star talisman. Now, the Pleiades is a star cluster, really, that is currently at 0 degrees Gemini and 10 minutes of the tropical zodiac. And so that's why right here in this chart we have 0 degrees Gemini rising. I try to get as close to that as I can. Typically for fixed star talismans, you want the degree of the star as close to the minute really as you can to be either on the ascendant or on the midheaven, one of those two positions. You want the moon to be applying a conjunction to the fixed star as closely as you can, while also paying special attention to the planet the moon will immediately apply to at the same time. So you want the moon to be conjoin the fixed star on the ascendant or the midheaven, and you want the next planet that the moon applies to be, in my opinion, of the nature of that fixed star. Every fixed star is assigned the nature of 1 or 2 of the traditional 7 planets, and so that's what you're focused on. The Pleiades is a star of the nature of the moon and Mars, and here we have the moon on the ascendant applying a trine to Mars in Libra, and that is really kind of the goal that we're focused on. One point that I will make really quickly is, if you're going to craft your own fixed star talisman elections, which you absolutely should, is that to make sure that the moon is applying a conjunction to the fixed star. I don't care what Agrippa says, it has to be a conjunction. Other aspects to stars do not count. So when it comes to Pleiades fixed star talismans, they really have kind of 2 main functions. The first is that they're very heavily focused on the eyes, and this is because in traditional astrology, star clusters like the Pleiades star cluster or the Aeschylus star clusters in the constellation of Cancer can traditionally show afflictions to the eyes. So individuals who have, say, their moon here or their sun here natally, the kind of stereotypical textbook interpretation is that, oh, this person will have weak eyesight or have an affliction to the eye or things like that. So when you take that information and apply it in a more proactive magical context, what you have then is preservation of the eyes, strengthening of the eyesight, or increasing somebody's ability to see. So an individual who is suffering from like glaucoma or recovering from an eye injury, things like that, the Pleiades talismans can be very helpful in helping somebody along the healing process or slowing down degenerative processes of the eyes. So that's one method. It can be much more of a medical, specifically focused on the eyes. Another function that's kind of related to that really is that it expands the ability to see. So one of the Agrippa tells us that Pleiades fixed star talismans are used to be able to see spirits and daimons, so they can help an individual kind of access that kind of third inner eye to be able to see more evocative or have more evocative visual experiences of the spirit world. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. You can also expand that. You're not just like seeing spirits or daimons or kind of like super celestial or supernatural events. It can also be used as a method to communicate with the deceased. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then finally, I guess this is certainly the third thing that Pleiades star talismans are for. Thirdly is that they are said to give power over magic, which is perfect for spooky season, I guess. So not only is it that ability to see into the spirit world or have stronger, more evocative visualizations, but also to be able to have a deeper spiritual connection to that and be able to facilitate, you know, the strengthening of other talismans or the creation of other talismans or other works. So it can be something of a power amplifier if that is something that you are in need of. So definitely something to keep in mind. When we're talking about the election itself, there are parts that are that are kind of meh about it. So kind of our main focus in fixed star talismans is that we want the moon to be applying to the fixed star on an angle. I talked about that. And then kind of a big personal thing for me, not necessarily written in the text, but I think makes a lot of sense, and something that I stick with, is that the moon's next aspect must be to a planet of the nature of that star. So because the Pleiades star cluster is of the nature of the moon and Mars, it was important to have the moon applying to a trine to Mars in Libra. So that's good, but you never want to do something where the moon is especially banged up. So, the aspect to Mars is good. There's not an aspect to Saturn involved. It's a separating trine, so the moon's fine there. And the moon doesn't really suffer from any kind of difficulties at this time. But another thing that we have to consider always is Lord of the first house. In this instance, because Gemini is on the ascendant, we have to focus here on Mercury. And Mercury is kind of meh. There's not a whole lot good going on for it. It's in the 6th house, which isn't great. You typically don't want the Lord of the Ascendant to be cadent. But he's not afflicted by Saturn or Mars, so he's averse to Mars and kind of separating from a sextile with Saturn. So, it could be worse. This isn't kind of the best fixed star Pleiades talisman that you can find. So if you're looking for something that maybe is a little bit stronger, I can totally do that. But this is a great one to kind of get introduced to the Pleiades fixed star and kind of see if you have a liking for it before committing to something a bit better or a bit more high quality. Our second and final electional opportunity for this 2-week period is going to be a 12th Lunar Mansion talisman on October 23rd, kind of in the early morning hours for me, 2:17 a.m. And, kind of a standard for Lunar Mansion talismans, we want to have the moon in that mansion on the ascendant or on the midheaven, and the moon applying to a planet who is helpful to whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. The 12th Lunar Mansion is one that we've talked about a couple of times here. It's kind of our best negative mansion that we could probably have, or perhaps maybe better way to phrase it, our most positively utilized negative mansion. Which is fine because when we're working with waning moon periods, as we always are between full and new moons, we have to be very conscious of the giving away energy, the giving back energy, or the separating, destructive kind of energy. Like, be respectful of it and then use it if you can or you have an opportunity for it. 12th Lunar Mansion is all about separations, breaking of bonds, disillusion, and getting rid of inappropriate things. Just very, very kind of core archetypal waning moon energy, big waning energy, I guess. And so, there are always things in this world that we need to get rid of and move past, and the 12th Lunar Mansion can help facilitate that, especially if those things are kind of sticking to us in one way or another. So focusing on the election itself, we do have the moon in the 12th Lunar Mansion on the cusp of the first house. And the planet that she's applying to next is actually going to be this square to Mercury. Typically, square aspects aren't ones that I try to utilize a lot or focus on very much, just because they're more difficult. And we don't usually want that more difficult energies unless there's some sort of mitigating factor involved that smooths it out kind of considerably. I really don't usually want it. But because the 12th Lunar Mansion is a destructive mansion, really at heart, and it's about breaking things apart and causing those kinds of conflicts, a square is a bit more appropriate to use. Even though a sextile or trine might make the separating process a little bit easier. So in this instance, we would always pretty prefer trines or sextiles just because they're easier for people to work with. But because we are, because healing is uncomfortable and, breaking bad habits or getting out of bad situations is intrinsically uncomfortable, having a square represent that is not a bad thing. It's not, negative thing. It's just a reflection of the reality that somebody is in. So the square to Mercury is definitely a planet that can mess something up and can break something apart. And so having that moon contact through that square is just another way to express that. But I didn't leave us completely out, up the creek without a paddle, as they say, because I also chose this degree specifically because we also have the trine to Jupiter to the ascendant degree. And that, Jupiter is always going to be a really stabilizing, really allowing presence. And so bringing that into the election itself can help considerably somebody who is struggling with something. All right, well, those were our 2 astrological magic election opportunities for the coming 2 weeks between the Aries Full Moon and the Scorpio New Moon. If you have any questions or comments about anything talked about in this video, be sure to drop them in the comment section below or reach out to me on social media. Happy to answer any questions you have there. Check out the description for a link to an Instagram post of mine where I talk about my experiences with the Pleiades fixed star talismans that I made last fall. It's not something that I've talked about a whole lot with a lot of people, but I'm happy to share those experiences with anybody who might be considering, making a Pleiades star talisman for themselves, to have kind of a taste of what to expect, or at least what I experienced out of it. And if you have any experiences with Pleiades fixed star talismans or ritual work, or 12th Lunar Mansion talismans ritual work, or any mansion, star, or planetary ritual that I've ever talked about, or even those that I haven't talked about, please share them with me. I love to hear other people's experiences with what they've done and how astrological magic has helped them in their lives. And with that being said, I'll see you guys on the Scorpio New Moon. Take care until then.